Welcome to our deep dive into the world of listening and responding.
Yeah.
I think you'll be surprised by how much this goes beyond, basic communication skills.
Absolutely.
Like we're really going to kind of unpack how to truly understand another person,
Yeah.
especially in a counseling setting.
Mm.
But honestly, these insights can apply to like any conversation you have.
hmm
We've got excerpts from Choices, Interviewing and Counseling Skills for Canadians,
Oh, nice.
your own notes, and some study questions that you've pulled together.
Great.
It's a really fascinating blend of practical advice and research.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
So let's dive in. Okay, so starting with a simple question.
Okay.
What does it really mean to listen? I mean, we hear words all day long,
Yeah.
but how often do we actually truly understand what someone is trying to communicate?
That's the key, isn't it? Your notes highlight a crucial distinction between simply hearing and actively listening for understanding.
Yeah, and the textbook lays out this 5-step process. Hearing, selecting and sorting, remembering, understanding, and finally, responding.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's like links in a chain. If one link is weak, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize how much is happening beneath the surface of just a simple conversation.
Exactly. Each step builds on the one before it, and this is where active listening comes in, particularly in a counseling context. It's about using specific techniques to show the person you're with that you're fully present, engaged, and genuinely trying to grasp their world.
Like you're really with them.
Yeah. And the research shows it's not just about being nice, active listening, especially when it includes empathy, is linked to positive change in counseling.
Okay, so active listening is important, but how do you actually do it?
Right.
How do you make it real?
Figure 5.4 in your textbook breaks down the components of active listening into 6 key areas: attending, silence, asking questions, paraphrasing, empathy, and summarizing.
6.
Each one plays a role in creating a space where the client feels truly heard.
Okay, let's start with attending, because I think that sets the stage for everything else.
Okay, sure.
And I love how my notes highlight the SOLAR acronym, so easy to remember.
SOLAR is a great way to remember the physical aspects of attending. Square on, open posture, lean forward, eye contact, and relax. Think about the last time you felt truly listened to. Chances are that person was exhibiting some of these behaviors. They were facing you directly, maybe leaning in slightly, making eye contact, and looking relaxed.
Showing that they're present.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those subtle cues can make such a difference.
Absolutely. But it's also important to remember what the textbook calls out as a success tip. Nonverbal cues should be interpreted cautiously. What might mean attentiveness in one culture could mean something completely different in another, or even with a different person.
Oh, but context matters.
For sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the metacommunication concept from my notes, all those unspoken messages we send through tone of voice, body language, and things like that. Like, I remember this one time, a friend told me, "I'm fine." But her whole body was saying the opposite,
Oh, yeah.
She was avoiding eye contact, her voice was tight, her shoulders were slumped. I'm fine.
Oh.
Definitely did not mean I'm fine.
That's a perfect example. Those nonverbal cues can either reinforce or contradict what's being said. And that's where we start to see potential communication barriers pop up. Your textbook's diagram of the communication process highlights these points of disruption. There can be barriers on the sender's side, like your friend not clearly expressing her feelings. And then there can be barriers on the receiver's side. Maybe our own biases or assumptions are clouding our understanding.
Yeah, it's like navigating a minefield. I can see how easy it would be to get caught up in your own reactions and miss what the other person is really trying to say.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to overcome those obstacles?
The text offers some really helpful strategies, starting with building trust. When you have that foundation of trust, it's easier to give someone the benefit of the doubt and assume goodwill. It's also about minimizing noise, not just external distractions, but also that internal chatter of our own assumptions and judgments.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We have to quiet that inner critic so we can truly hear what's being said.
That reminds me of something you said earlier. Listening doesn't mean you have to agree with the other person.
Right.
You can understand their perspective without endorsing it.
Exactly. So many people get tripped up thinking that listening equals agreement, and they shut down if they disagree. But true understanding requires being able to hold multiple perspectives, even conflicting ones.
Right, like you can understand where they're coming from without necessarily agreeing with them.
Yeah.
So we've talked about attending and some of the things that can get in the way of truly listening.
Right.
What about the role of silence? My notes highlight it as a powerful tool, especially in counseling.
Silence can be incredibly powerful. It creates space for reflection, allows emotions to settle, And sometimes, silence speaks volumes.
Yeah, and the strategy choices chart for using silence is really interesting. Sometimes it's appropriate to let the silence continue, especially if someone seems to be thinking things through or processing emotions. But other times, it might be better to interrupt the silence, especially if it's unclear what it means or if the person seems to be struggling.
There's definitely no one-size-fits-all approach to silence. It's a tool that requires careful judgment, sensitivity, and really tuning in to the person and the context.
So it's not just about being quiet. It's about knowing when and how to use silence effectively.
Right.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about paraphrasing and summarizing.
Okay.
My notes define these as techniques for enhancing clarity and focus in a conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like I could use some help with summarizing. It always feels a little tricky to me. What exactly is the difference between just making something shorter and really summarizing effectively?
You're right. Summarizing is more than just creating a shorter version of what someone said. It's about distilling the essence of their message and highlighting the key points. And your notes mention two specific types of summarizing. Content summary, which focuses on the facts,
Okay.
and theme summary, which is about identifying patterns and key ideas.
So content summary would be like, you said A, B, and C, whereas theme summary would be more like, it sounds like you're struggling with X because of Y and Z.
Exactly. Content summary is like reporting the news, while theme summary is more like providing analysis and connecting the dots. And the textbook points out that summarizing has multiple benefits. It confirms understanding, organizes information, and helps focus the conversation. It can also bring a sense of closure, especially in a longer conversation.
It's like hitting the save button, making sure you've captured everything important.
Precisely. And that sense of closure can be very reassuring to the other person. It lets them know that you've been truly listening and that you get it.
This is making me realize just how much intentionality goes into effective communication. It's not just about talking. It's about using these specific techniques to ensure understanding and build that connection. It's like having a communication toolbox and knowing which tool to use for each situation.
It's a great analogy. And like any skilled craftsperson, the more you practice with these tools, the more adept you become.
So we've covered attending, some potential barriers to communication, and techniques like silence, paraphrasing, and summarizing. I feel like we're starting to build a picture of what it takes to truly listen and respond.
And it goes way beyond simply exchanging words, doesn't it? It's about creating a space for genuine connection and understanding.
This has been eye-opening already.
Yeah.
Thinking about all the different conversations I have at work, with friends and family, even just casual interactions, and how I can use these techniques to really up my listening game. What are some of the common mistakes people make when they try to summarize, especially in a counseling setting? I want to make sure I'm doing it right.
One common mistake is summarizing too soon. Remember, it's about capturing the essence of what's been said, not just rushing to condense the information. Let the speaker fully express themselves before you jump in with a summary.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see how a premature summary could make someone feel like they're being cut off or like you're not really listening.
Exactly. Another pitfall is summarizing inaccurately. This can happen if you're not paying close attention, if you're letting your own biases creep in, or if you're just not putting in the effort to truly understand the speaker's perspective.
So it's not just about remembering the words, it's about capturing the meaning behind them, right?
Absolutely. A good summary reflects both the content and the feeling of what's been said. It's about conveying that you've grasped not just the facts, but also the emotional undercurrent.
I'm realizing that summarizing is actually a lot more nuanced than I initially thought. It's not just a mechanical skill. It requires empathy, careful listening, and a genuine effort to connect with the speaker's experience.
You're spot on. And when done well, summarizing can be a powerful tool for building rapport, clarifying understanding, and moving the conversation forward in a meaningful way.
Okay, so I'm getting a better handle on summarizing. Now let's circle back to paraphrasing. It seems straightforward on the surface, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just repeating what someone said.
You're right. There's definitely a subtle art to paraphrasing effectively. The textbook definition emphasizes using your own words to reflect back what you've heard. It's not about parroting, but rather about demonstrating that you've grasped the underlying meaning and can express it in a fresh way.
So it's like translating what they said into your own language while staying true to their original intent.
Exactly. And the textbook provides some helpful examples. Like if a client says, "I feel so overwhelmed," you might paraphrase by saying, "It sounds like you have a lot on your plate right now." You're acknowledging their feeling of overwhelm, but using different wording to capture the essence of what they shared.
That makes it feel more collaborative too, like you're working together to make sure the message is clear.
Absolutely. And that collaborative spirit is essential for building rapport and trust, which, as we've discussed, are crucial foundations for open communication.
Thinking back to my friend who said, I'm fine, but clearly wasn't, how could I have used paraphrasing in that situation?
You could have said something like, I hear you saying you're fine, but I'm sensing that something else might be going on. Would you be willing to share what's on your mind? You're acknowledging their words while also creating space for them to open up further.
That's really helpful. I can see how paraphrasing can be a gentle way to encourage someone to elaborate or to clarify something that might not have been fully expressed.
Exactly. And it can also be a way to check your own understanding. By reflecting back what you've heard, you're essentially asking, did I get that right? It's a way to ensure you're both on the same page.
It's all making me realize how much intentionality goes into truly effective communication. It's not just about talking. It's about strategically using these techniques to ensure understanding and build connection.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about being mindful of the process and consciously choosing the most effective tools for the situation.
It's like having that communication toolbox we were talking about earlier and knowing what each tool does and when to use it. It feels empowering to have these techniques at my disposal.
It is empowering, and like any skill, the more you practice, the more natural and intuitive it becomes.
Okay, so we've covered attending, barriers to communication, silence, paraphrasing, and summarizing. What about the asking questions part of active listening? I feel like that's a key piece we haven't really touched on yet.
You're absolutely right. Asking questions is a powerful way to deepen your understanding, gather information, and encourage the speaker to explore their thoughts and feelings more fully.
I can see how the type of questions you ask can really influence the direction of a conversation. What are some of the different kinds of questions you might use in a counseling context?
There are several types of questions that can be helpful depending on what you're trying to achieve. Open questions are great for encouraging the speaker to elaborate and share their perspective. They usually begin with words like, what, how, or tell me more. For example, you might ask, what was that experience like for you?
Those kinds of questions seem like they'd create more space for the speaker to express themselves freely without feeling limited by a yes or no response.
Exactly. Then there are closed questions, which are more focused and can be useful for gathering specific information or clarifying details. These questions typically elicit a yes or no answer or a short factual response. For instance, you might ask, did that happen before or after you moved?
So you might use closed questions to kind of pinpoint certain events or facts within a larger story.
Exactly. It's about using the right type of question for the right purpose. And then you have clarifying questions, which, as the name suggests, are used to clarify something that might be ambiguous or confusing. You might say, when you say you felt stuck, what did that feel like for you?
It seems like clarifying questions would be especially important when dealing with complex emotions or abstract concepts.
Absolutely. And they can also help prevent misunderstandings and ensure you're both on the same page.
This is fascinating. I'm realizing that asking questions is so much more than just gathering information. It's about showing genuine curiosity, guiding the conversation, and helping the speaker to delve deeper into their own experiences. It's like you're a detective, uncovering clues and piecing together the puzzle of their story.
That's a great way to think about it. And just like a detective, you need to be observant, attentive, and skilled at asking the right questions to get to the heart of the matter.
This whole deep dive has been a revelation. I'm already starting to see how I can use these techniques in my everyday conversations to really enhance my listening skills and connect with people on a deeper level. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit intimidated by the idea of empathy. It's mentioned throughout the textbook and my notes, but I'm still not entirely clear on how to actually demonstrate it. It seems like one of those things that's easier said than done.
It does feel like a tricky one to master.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that's easier said than done.
You're right. Empathy is a complex skill, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with. It's often described as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, but it goes beyond just recognizing their emotions. It's about truly connecting with their experience and conveying that understanding in a way that makes them feel seen and heard.
So it's not just about saying, I understand how you feel.
Right.
There needs to be more to it than that.
Exactly. True empathy has both a thinking part and a feeling part. It's about trying to see the world from their perspective, like putting yourself in their shoes, and it's also about connecting with their emotions on a deeper level. It's about feeling with them, not just for them.
That makes sense, but how do you actually convey that empathy? What are some tangible ways to actually demonstrate it?
There are many ways to show empathy, and it often depends on the situation and the person. But some general approaches include reflective statements where you mirror back the speaker's emotions. You might say, "It sounds like you're feeling really frustrated," or "You seem to be carrying a lot of sadness right now."
So you're not just acknowledging their words, but you're also reflecting back the emotions you're picking up on.
Exactly. And then there's validation, which is about communicating that their feelings are understandable given their experience. You might say, "Given what you've been through, it makes sense that you'd be feeling this way."
Yeah, validation feels like it would be so powerful, especially for someone who's been feeling misunderstood or dismissed.
It can be incredibly validating to have your feelings acknowledged and affirmed.
Hmm.
And then there's nonverbal communication, which we touched on earlier. Things like making eye contact, leaning in, and having an open and relaxed posture can communicate empathy even without words.
It's like your body is saying, I'm here with you, I'm listening.
Yeah, exactly. And don't underestimate the power of silence. Sometimes the most empathetic response is simply to be fully present and hold space for the other person's emotions without feeling the need to fill the silence with words.
Right. It makes me think back to the different ways to use silence that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
It's about being sensitive and intuitive, knowing when to speak and when to simply listen.
Exactly. And remember, empathy is not about fixing or giving advice. It's about understanding and connecting.
Okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture of what empathy looks and sounds like.
Mm.
It's about reflecting emotions, validating feelings, using nonverbal cues, and being comfortable with silence. It's about creating a safe and supportive space for someone to share their experience without judgment.
You've captured it perfectly. And the beautiful thing about empathy is that it's a skill that can be learned and developed with practice.
This whole deep dive has been incredibly valuable. I feel like I've gained a whole new set of tools and perspectives for approaching communication.
And remember, the real learning comes from putting those tools into practice. Pay attention to how others respond when you use these techniques. Notice how it feels to truly listen, to respond with empathy, to create a space for genuine understanding.
That's a great reminder. It's not just about changing how we communicate with others. It's also about transforming our own relationship with communication.
Exactly. When we approach communication with intentionality, empathy, and a genuine desire to connect, we open ourselves up to deeper understanding, stronger relationships, and more fulfilling interactions.
This has been a truly transformative deep dive. Thank you for guiding me through this fascinating world of listening and responding.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the journey of learning and growth in communication never really ends. There's always more to discover, more to refine, and more to share.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. But the conversation doesn't end here. I encourage you to reflect on what you've learned. Experiment with these techniques in your own life and see what new insights and connections emerge. Until next time, keep diving deep.